In today's video, we're building a simple responsive sidebar using Next.js, Tailwind CSS, React icons, and a few features from Next to give it some life. What we have is the beginning stages of a dashboard application where we're building a responsive nav bar that's going to hold our logo at the top of the view, which will be named Student Tracker. Beneath it, we have the home and kids routes. If you click on the home route, it's going to redirect you to that route. Notice that we have an indicator showing that we are on the home route. And if we click on the kids route, we'll be redirected to /kids, which also highlights that particular icon, indicating that we're on that specific route. In order to bring this to life, all we're using is use path name from Next Navigation, which is going to be capturing the path name from the URL. And if it is on that active route, we're going to highlight that specific route. And we're using React icons not only for a better user experience, but also when we're on a small viewport, we'll be showing just the icon so the user still has a way to navigate the application. So if you were looking to build in a lightweight, flexible sidebar that's responsive for Next.js or React, but using Tailwind CSS, this is going to be the perfect video for you. And with that said, let's jump into code and get started. So we'll begin by creating a new repository for this project. Feel free to we'll begin by creating a new repository for this project on GitHub. So if you don't have a GitHub account, it is free to sign up. But if you do, go ahead and log in. Once you're logged in, be sure to go to the URL github/new. From there, within the general section, we're going to add the repository name. Feel free to name your project whatever you like, but I'm just going to name mine Next Student Tracker. In section 2, we're going to keep in section 2, feel free to set the visibility to whatever you prefer. We're not going to add a README file, nor are we going to add a .gitignore. From there, we'll click on Create Repository. After being redirected to the unique GitHub for the new repository that we just created, what I'm going to do is go to Gitpod to have a virtual IDE for my project, but you can use yours on your local directory. Just be sure to clone the repository and add it to your project file. But if not, you still can follow along. You just won't have your code on GitHub the way I do. But from this website, I'm going to select the repository, and the one I'll be selecting is what I just created. And if you're doing or following along using Gitpod as well, we'll be using VS Code, and we're going to have just a standard computer desktop access, and then click continue. Should be fairly familiar with this window. And from the terminal, I want to go ahead and install the latest version of a Next.js 15 project, or latest version of a Next.js project. So we'll type in the command npx create next app at latest, and I'm going to install it within the current directory, so I'll add a space, then a dot. For the project, we will be using TypeScript. We'll say yes to slimp, yes to Tailwind, no to the src directory, yes to the app router, yes to the turbo pack, and no to the import alias. And we'll just give it a few minutes to finish installing. Once it's complete, we'll have the latest version of a Next.js 15 project installed within our text editor. Before we spin up the application, I'm just going to set up some quick default boiler. Before we spin up the application, I'm just going to make some minor changes to remove some of the boiler code. First, I'll go within the page.tsx file, and I'm just going to remove the current div and all of the styling within it, and just add a new div and some text, so we'll have something to present on screen. And we'll go ahead and remove the image import while we're at it. Then inside of the global.css, we'll just remove all of the initial boiler code added from Next. And I'm going to set the height and width of our application so we have a full size page as it pertains to the viewport for the height and width. So we'll say the body, the HTML, :root, and .app. Inside of it, we'll just set the height to 100%, the width to 100%, the The overflow on the x-axis we're going to hide, and I'm going to set the text size to be default small, and we can always make changes to it as we see appropriate in the application. We'll close this file out, and then finally inside of the package.json, I'm going to add a distinguished or unique package manager of npm at 10.5.2, and also some additional overrides to React DOM and Next. That way we won't have any compatibility conflicts once we install additional packages inside of the project. So let's go ahead and spin up the application so we can begin to create the sidebar. Or let's go ahead and spin up the application so we can begin to style and build our application. So back in the terminal, let's type in the command npm run dev, press enter. This is going to spin up the Next.js 15 project on your local host. So from the terminal, we're just going to click on the URL listed within it. I'm just going to move to this view. And as you can see, we currently have homepage on screen that's being presented from our Next.js project. So let's begin to set up the layout of our project so we can then focus on building the responsive sidebar. So the first thing we'll do is create a route grouping within our project. And if you're not familiar with route grouping, it's a way to organize the folders within your project. And in addition, to make sure it's a way to organize your folders within your project so that you can have different layouts for different routes as you see fit. The key to it is to add this folder within the app directory. And because we know Next.js is a folder routing application, or it routes based on the folder structure, we need Next to ignore this particular route or this particular folder. So the way we go about it is we create the grouping, but we make sure that we enclose it with parentheses. So the name of this grouping is going to be website. And then notice that I have it enclosed in parentheses. This way, we're going to make sure no matter what, this way we're going to make sure that any folder within this grouping is going to share the layout. So if we were to have an admin page or a dashboard page or anything else within this directory, it will always have the same layout that we have within this folder. So the way we set up the unique layout is we'll just add a folder, a file within this folder of layout.tsx. And I am going to copy the TypeScript so we don't have to retype it back in. And then inside of the layout.tsx, I'm just going to use the Visual Studio Code React snippet so that I can create a quick export functional component of layout. And then we'll paste in the text that we just copied from layout. And inside of the return statement, inside of the divs, let's remove the word layout and add children. And then now, as I mentioned, because we have a route grouping and we have this layout, any route that we create within this route grouping is going to share the layout that we have for this folder. So the way we can test this out to make sure that it works is, first I'm going to drag the main page.tsx into the website grouping. Yes, we do want to move it. And then to show you that this is the unique layout, I'm just going to add the text of navbar right above the children. And as we can see, we have navbar displayed on screen. So if we were to add a directory within this grouping named admin and then a page.tsx file inside of it, we'll create a quick export default of admin so we can have something on screen. I'm sorry, let me change this to admin page. Click save. Now at the end of our local host, if we add admin to go to the admin route, we'll notice that we still have the navbar and we're on the admin page. But now if we go inside the app directory and outside of the website grouping that we just created, let's create a folder named dashboard. And inside of it, a file named page.tsx. We'll just create a quick dashboard page functional component, dashboard page. Click Save. Now, if we go to localhost/dashboard, notice that we do not have the navbar text above dashboard page because it is what's outside of this website route grouping. So I just want to give a quick demonstration of how that works so that you can see that this is an easy way to create unique layouts within Next and also organize those directories, those routes within a particular grouping. So we'll go back to the home page and we'll remove the additional routes that we just created. So let's begin by, so what we're looking to get accomplished in this video is building out the sidebar of our dashboard full stack applications named the student tracker. So we'll begin by setting up the layout and the sidebar first. So within the layout.tsx file that we just created, inside of the return statement in the div, we'll add a class name and we'll give it a height of full and we'll set the direction to flex to make sure that this is working properly and to show you why we added the height. We set the height of our project. If we set the background color to amber 200, notice that it takes up the entire page. But if we did not set the height of the application to 100%, we'll just comment it out. Notice that it is now not taking up the height of the screen. That is because we didn't set the height of the app. So that was the reason that we added that quick styling within the global.css. I just wanted you to see that. So let's go ahead and close this out and we'll come back to this view and let's make sure that this works. Perfect. So now next up, we want to create the actual sidebar itself. So I'm going to remove the navbar text and we'll make this full screen and we'll add a div. And I'm just going to add sidebar listed here. And we see the text sidebar right next to home page. That's because we set the direction to flex. Now I'm going to add a class name inside of this div because we'll want to style it. But we'll also want to set the styling for the children because the sidebar is going to take up a certain viewport of the screen regardless to the size of the window. So we'll go ahead and highlight the children that's enclosed in curly braces and replace it with a main HTML tag and paste in the children. Notice there's no change with that. That's perfect. And inside of main, we'll just go ahead and add class name because we're going to need to style it as well. So the styling for the main is going to be simple for this portion of the video. Let's just go ahead and set the width of this to 86%. And just so that we can see it properly, I'm going to set the background color to purple 200. And notice this is taking up 86% of the actual viewport. Now we'll go back to the div that is holding the text of sidebar. We'll set the width of this to be 14%. Notice that this is now taking up 14% of the actual viewport. And just to show you what this looks like on a full screen, I'm going to overlay that view now. Give me just a moment. And to show you what it looks like on a large screen, here is the layout of our application. And just to show you how easily we made it responsive, if we adjust the size of our viewport, notice that it is always going to take up, the home view, is going to take up 86% while the sidebar takes up 14%. And notice that it is completely responsive. So that's just a quick, easy way to get that done. All right, so now we'll shift our focus to actually styling the sidebar and in its layout. We'll remove the background color for right now from the main HTML tag, and we'll set the border of the div that's holding our sidebar to right because we'll like to have a border on the right, and you can see that now on screen. And we'll set the border color to neutral 200. We can see that the color of our border just shifted. And then we'll also like the styling for it to be dotted versus the standard straight line. And I know it may be a little difficult to see, but there is a dotted line versus a solid. Let me see if I change the color momentarily, you can see it a lot better now, but we'll go back to 200. Perfect. Now we're ready to create our sidebar and logo component. So we'll replace inside of the directory, inside of our root directory, let's add a folder named components. Inside of components, we'll add a directory named UI, and we'll also add another folder inside of it named sidebar. The structure of this should be components. Inside of components, there's a folder named UI and also a folder named sidebar. So inside of the UI directory, let's add a file named logo.tsx. To have a functional component that we can at least have something on screen, we'll use the RAFCE snippet to create that export default const named logo. And I'm just going to replace that logo with the same thing, but just have the L capitalized. We'll click save. And then inside of the components directory, inside of sidebar, we'll add a file named sidebar.tsx. Going to do the same shortcut and name it sidebar with a capital S and capital B. Now let's go ahead and import this into the layout. So at the top of the layout.tsx file, we'll go ahead and import logo. And with the IntelliSense on, it should recommend @/components/logo. Perfect. And then we'll also want to import the sidebar, and it should also recommend @components/sidebar, and that cares for the error with our local host. And we'll remove the sidebar text and replace it with logo first. So we'll have our logo at the top. Then we'll have our sidebar directly beneath it. Awesome. So let's begin by styling the logo for our application. And all I'll be doing is using a icon and some simple Tailwind CSS to create a simple logo. Feel free to make this as unique and custom as you like. But in order to install the icon, I will need to add some dependencies, or excuse me, I'll need to add a icon package. For this project, I'm going to be using React icons. So back in the terminal, we'll keep our project running, but in a new terminal, let's install the command npm react-icons and press enter. This is going to give us the access to React icons, and you can use any icon package that you want, SVGs as well. I just find it pretty simple to use this just to have something a little unique. We'll go ahead and close out the terminal, and at the top of the logo component, let's go ahead and import our first icon, which will be from React icons slash, and I'm using PI for this one. And the icon that we want to bring in this file is the student icon. So we'll type PI student, and we're going to use the duotone. Perfect. And we'll also want to gain access to link, and this is going to come from next/link. Link is going to allow us to navigate or route or gain access to various routes within our application just by including the href and the slash with the name of that specific route. So the way we're going to use our logo is we'll remove the div and replace it with link. And we'll add the text of logo inside of it. But remember, all links have to have a href. And with Next.js, because I want this logo to route back to the home screen, inside of the href, I'm just going to include a string of parentheses, excuse me, and then the slash, which represents the home route. Then inside of logo, we'll go ahead and add in the PI student duotone icon just so we can see it. Perfect. And we see the student listed there. Let's go ahead and style our student a little bit by adding a class name. and we'll set the width to 6 and the height to 6, and we'll make the text color neutral 600. And then now inside of the href, let's add a class name of flex, and we'll set the direction of flex to column. On medium devices, we're going to set the flex direction to row. We want the items centered on the x-axis. We'll go justify center, so they're centered on the y. No, I'm sorry, justify start, so that they're at the start of the flex container. We'll give it a gap of 1. On medium devices, we'll set the gap to 2. And on hover, we want the opacity to be 80. And we'll add transition so it is fairly smooth. And then inside of the link tag, let's add a span. This is going to represent the name of the application, and I'm just going to call it student tracker. And then in the span, I'm going to give this some styling. So we'll add class name, and we'll set the initial state of it to hidden. On medium devices, we want it to be inline block. We'll set the text color to neutral 600, the font to bold. We'll make the tracking tight. The text is going to be small, and on medium, we want the text to be base. Let me refresh my environment. All right, sorry about that. I needed to restart my environment. But as you can see, we have a icon that represents our logo. And I think, let me add a little bit of padding there. We'll add a padding of 4. There we go. There's the icon that represents our logo. And if we look at it on a large view, you see it is the icon with the text student. And as we reduce the viewport size, the icon goes away. We got a little bug there. I think we'll make this on medium. Let's change that a little bit. No, that works. And as you can see, the text disappears, then the icon disappears and it reappears. Let's make one minor change to it. Instead of it being medium inline block, let's change it to large, and we'll also update the text on large to be base. Now if we look at it, that works. Next up, we'll shift our focus to styling and building out the actual sidebar. So the first thing I want to do is store the routes within a central location, so it'll be easy to add additional routes as the application grows. So within the root of our project, we'll add a folder named lib, and inside of it, we'll add a file named route.ts. So within this file, I just want to have an object that holds. So within this file, we want to have an array of objects that hold the routes for our application. We also want to show an icon on small view desktops or small view viewports, and on large, we're going to show the icon and the description. So we'll start by importing the icons that we're going to use to start out. The first one is going to be, well, both will be from React icons, and we're going to use the FI icons in this file. We'll bring in the home in addition to users. Then we'll create a export const. We'll name it sidebar routes, and this will be an array. And we'll have an array of objects. The first key will be label, and the value will be home. The next one will be href, and this is going to represent the actual route, and this will be the home route, so we'll just have slash. And then we'll also need a icon, and this will be fi home. We'll add one more object. This one will have label, and the value will be kids. The href for it will be slash kids. And then the icon we're going to use is fi users. So we'll save this file. These are the routes that we'll be using to navigate the application. And we'll also start by displaying the icon within the sidebar. And we'll have, on large viewports, we'll have the text. And then the next thing we'll do is we'll add path name. That way we can distinguish the color if we're on that specific route. So let's go ahead and build out the sidebar next. We'll close out the route.ts file because we don't need it anymore at this point. And we'll go back to the file named sidebar.tsx. First, we'll want to import link, and that is coming from next/link. Then we're going to import the sidebar routes that we just created. Be sure that it is enclosed in curly braces because we want to get access to the information within that file. And finally, we're going to install, next we're going to install a lightweight package named CLSX, which just allows us to dynamically pass in data inside of the JSX. So inside of the terminal, let's type in the command npm iclsx and press enter. Already installed. We'll need to import it. So we'll import CLSX, and it should be coming from CLSX. And then finally, we'll bring in use path name, and that should be coming from next navigation. Perfect. Sorry, and because we're using use path name and next, that's coming from next navigation. Remember, navigation is client side activity. So within this file, we will need to mark it as use client. So we'll add the use client directive at the top, and then that takes care of React. So we no longer have that error on screen. Inside of the function, let's start by getting access to the use path name. So we'll just create a const named path name and set it equal to use path name, and we'll go ahead and call it. Inside of the return statement, let's remove the div and replace it with an aside, and that is a HTML tag. Just so that we can see it come to life, let's go ahead and bring in the icon. Inside of the aside, let's just pass in the text aside. Within the aside tag, we'll pass in the text aside and save it. Now we're ready to style it a little bit. We'll add a class name and give it a width of full. We'll set the direction to flex column. Give it padding of 4 for consistency and set the background color to white. If we click save, you'll notice that the aside shifted from here, text to here. We're ready to remove the aside text. Now we can go ahead and loop over the sidebar routes, and for each one within that array, we're going to display something on screen. So we'll need to loop over the sidebar routes first, and we know that requires JavaScript, so we'll pass in the curly braces, and then we'll just type sidebar routes dot map. For each item, we're going to name it route. No, sorry, this should have been the curly braces. We'll create the first const that will be is active. We'll set that equal to path name with 3 equal marks route.href, and that's basically just saying that if the path name matches route.href, then we want to say that it is active. Next, we'll create a const named icon with a capital I and set it equal to route.icon. Now we'll need to return something within this mapping. So we'll add the keyword return with the parentheses, and now the error messages is starting to go away. Within this return statement, we're going to return a link. We want each sidebar icon to be wrapped in link. And just so we can see something on screen, we'll go ahead and use the icon component, give it a class name of width of 5 and a height of 5. The href will need to have, the link will need to have its href, and we can make that route.href. And then it will also need a key. We'll set the key to route.href. All right, so now we see the icon for the human and the user there on screen. So let's go ahead and begin to style it a little bit. And you know what? I'll go ahead and add the span for the label, and that represents the name of the route. So we'll make that route.label. The styling, if I hit save, you'll see it right there. But for the span, remember on small devices, we want that text hidden. So inside the span, we'll give it a class name of hidden. And on medium, we'll make the text inline text. And then we'll go text small. Click save and it disappears. Perfect. Now we just need to style the link. We'll add a class name, and for this, and I've been using it anyway, but just be sure you have the curly braces because we're going to pass in some dynamic data and you can't use a string for it. So we'll also include temperate literals as well because we are passing in a variable. So the initial styling for the link will be flex. We'll set the items to be centered. We'll give it a gap of 3. We'll go rounded on the edges of medium. Can't see anything just yet, but that's okay. We'll set the padding on the Y to 2. We'll go transition, and on hover, we want the background to be orange 200. Click save, and you can see that listed there. And on hover, we get a little animation. Let me give some padding on the X of 3. There we go. So now it's centered. Looks a little better now. All right. So then now we want to leverage some dynamic data. So let's move this tag down and we'll add a comma. In the comma, we'll add a little bit of, or we'll add curly braces because we need to pass in some additional code. So then we'll go background color of orange. Actually, I'd rather go amber 200. We'll set the text to orange or amber 600. Let's make it 7. And we'll make the font semi-bold. This is if the text is not active, or excuse me, is active. So we'll add the semicolon right after it and we'll say is active. And then if it is not active, we want it to display something unique. So we'll say explanation is active. Remember, that means that it is not. And what we want for that is the text color to be neutral. We'll make it neutral 700. I think I am missing a parenthesis somewhere. Yep. Sorry, I forgot the main thing, the start of the show. So right here, we'll add CLSX. And then right before the very last curly braces, we'll add the closing parentheses, and that should take care of the error. Perfect. All right, so as you can see, we're on the home route and it is already showing active. So instead of it being amber 700, I think I'll make that neutral. Looks a little better. All right, and then now let's create a route named /kids to make sure that we can, that it highlights so that it's distinguished based on that. And I think on hover, instead of it being orange, let's make it amber. Looks a little better, and we'll give it a little more of a gap. Let's refresh this. Oh, you know what? That is the wrong one. I'm sorry. I want the one. Let's keep that amber. And I would rather give it flex column right here. Let's give it a gap of 4. That's a little better. Let's make it 3. All right, so now let's just create the kids route. Inside of the app directory, inside of the website grouping, we'll add a folder named kids, and inside of it, a page.tsx. We'll just create a quick export const named kids page. Click save. And then now if we click on this icon, it routes us to the kids page and we see our link is highlighted, indicating that we're on that specific route. Let's look at it now on a full screen view. We see we have the indicator, but we don't see the actual text itself. So let's change that. Back in the code editor, let's click on sidebar.tsx, and we don't need this inline text. It should just be medium inline. Now, if we take a look at it, now we see the text home and kids on screen. So with that's going to conclude this portion of the video. We've created a responsive sidebar using pure Tailwind CSS within the Next.js application. We have a React icon to give us some flair or some style for our CSS. We're using Tailwind to bring it to life. Use path name to capture the path name from the URL params of the route that we're on. And we're highlighting the name of the route to give a better user experience. In the next video, we're going to focus on the header of the application, which is where we'll have our search bar and a few other goodies. I'll see you in that video.